Hello, good people. This is your guy, Mr. Educator, Mr. Communicator, Mr. Free Thinker, coming back at you live once again from the Lone Star State with another edition of the Media Mike Speaks. And yes, this is breaking news, and a hot one. So we're going to break some news coming to us from the Dallas Morning News and Newsweek. So, as you have read, we are talking about Amber Guyger, former Dallas police officer, appeals conviction for the shooting of, you already know, Botham Jean back in 2018. And we're going to talk about this because this is interesting. Now, we knew this was coming. We knew this was coming, good people. Well, if you didn't know, now you know. So we're going to start off here. And I really want to get your thoughts here on this, because we're going to look at some things and I'm going to tell you how the law works a little bit. So let's get to it. A former Dallas police officer currently in jail for murdering her neighbor in 2018 is set to appear in court in an attempt to have her conviction squashed. Now, she did appear. Amber Guyger was sentenced to 10 years in prison in October of 2019 after she was found guilty of murdering Botham Jean inside his own home. So, during the trial, a court heard how Guyger had accidentally entered Jean's apartment, which was located one floor beneath hers in the Southside flats they both lived in, believing it was hers after finishing a long shift. Now, I talked about this case back then, and it clearly, the officer negligence thing, good people, I used to be a police officer. You're trained to observe things that are out of the ordinary. And when they showed the first part of the crime scene outside the door, and he had the red mat, and I'm not going to do too much of a backstory on this. Anyone could have saw that. You're a trained officer, number one, so you have an advantage. You have the training. Now, this is common sense. You see a red mat, you can see the red mat for about 50 feet away or more. So I don't buy I didn't buy it then, and I don't buy it now, but we are going to look at some things here. There are other variables too. Basically, we'll talk about it. Guyger then mistook Jean, who is black, for an intruder and shot him after she didn't see his hands. Did he raise his hands? Did he point anything at you? He just shot. I was afraid. He should be an officer. Guyger's defense team will attempt to try and acquit her murder conviction and replace it with criminally negligent homicide. We'll talk about that, which carries a lesser sentence. Oh, and it does. The appeal hangs on the argument that Guyger was right to shoot Jean because she believed he was in her apartment. Okay. Now, as you see, this is during the time of former Dallas Chief Renee Hall was in office at the time. So, and she left in November of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So she's no longer the chief, but this was during her tenure. This occurred. And now we see that Allison Jean, Botham's mother, says she will be forced to watch the hearings because she knows the media will come to her for a reaction to any decision. She goes on to quote here, "I know everyone has a right of appeal, and I believe she's utilizing that right." She goes on to quote with the Dallas Morning News. She told them, "But on the other hand, there is one person who cannot utilize any more rights because she took him away," which is true. She goes on to quote, "So haven't gotten 10 years, only 10 for killing someone who was in the prime of his life and doing no wrong in the comfort of his home. I believe that she ought to take accountability for it and move on," she added, unquote. No decision would be made during the first virtual hearing at the 5th District Court of Appeals in Dallas on Tuesday. Now, good people, let's get down to a little bit about what the attorneys were saying here, along with the judge, defense, prosecutor, and the judge. Now, what I want you to look at is here. This is how, what they're asking for to be criminal negligent homicide in the state of Texas. This is what they're looking at. And as you see here, look at that first bullet point. The defendant neglected their reasonable duty to prevent a death. If they can prove that, now I got to do all three. The defendant's actions directly caused the death, and the defendant was aware of the risk created by their actions. She was a former police officer. So, we know that. Now, take a look at the legal penalties. 6 months or up to 2 years in state jail. Time served. Okay. A fine of up to $10,000 and probation and community service. This is what you're most likely looking at. That is why they're going for where they're going. Now, let's move on and let's talk here at the attorneys. Now, Guyger's attorney states, quote, "My client, according to the facts, had a reasonable apprehension of danger when she walked into what she thought was her apartment." This is Mola, Amber Guyger's attorney. He says, quote, "If we agree that she thought she walked into her apartment, then the mistake of fact instruction applies. And then the question is, was her apprehension of danger reasonable?" Now, Justice Robbie Kipnis interrupted Mola to question the validity, excuse me, good people, of his argument. He goes on to quote, "Just because of her alleged mistake in belief about where she was doesn't negate her intent to kill," Judge Kipnis said. True. I do agree. That is true. Now, defense countered Mola. It negates the evil intent requirement for murder. He goes on to quote, "We wouldn't be talking about this if she had walked into her own apartment," unquote, Mola stated. Now, Prosecutor Douglas Gladden asked the court to reject Guyger's petition, arguing this is a murder case, not a criminal trespass case, unquote. Now, he goes on to say she knew Botham was a living human being. She pointed a gun at him. She intended to kill him. Gladden told the justices, "That's murder. It's not mistake of fact. It's not justified. Amber Guyger murdered Botham Jean. This court should say so and affirm the trial court's judgment." Now, Gladden said the mistake of fact claimed by Mola was never raised during Guyger's trial. Okay, yeah, it wasn't. But we are going to see what the verdict will be, good people. What are your thoughts? What do you think? For those of you who remember this case, because I do, because I talked about this, because I knew she was going to get time. I knew she was going to get found guilty. So then I knew she was going to get fired because she violated protocol. I'm sorry, you're a trained officer. No, 8.5 months of training with DPD. I'm sorry, no, there's no, no, you are a trained officer. That looks bad for the department. They got officers working double shifts and they don't even know where they are. We can't have that. So anyway, enough of that. What do you think, good people? Do you vote go or stay? It's been 3 years since that fateful day, and shortly thereafter, when Miss Guyger went away. And when the sentence was handed down after the verdict was read, people proceeded to give her a hug and a pat on the head. Now she's filing an appeal and could go free. And with that, she would most likely sing Jubilee. Now, if this happens, some would say it's not fair and not enough time served. On the other hand, others will say, let bygones be bygones, and justice has been served. All right, good people, sad to say, but that's it for today. And remember, if you had or have a bad day, try to make better decisions in life so that you can be okay. This is your guy, Mr. Educator, Mr. Communicator, Mr. Free Thinker. Subscribe, share, and like so that I can keep rocking on the mic. You all have a good night.